chapter of John, verses 1 through 18. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went toward the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture, that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes, but Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and she told them that he had said these things to her.
Thank you, all of you musicians, for great music today. The choir and the quartet, and bells and instrumentalists. Awesome, great Easter song. Thank you all, and I'm looking forward to the Hallelujah Chorus in just a little bit. So that's going to be great. It's good to see all of you today. And thank you to Louise Lease and Kay Walker for decorating the sanctuary for Easter. I walked in this morning, I was blown away. It looks awesome. Thank you so much. Christ is risen. Christ is risen indeed. Let us celebrate God raising Jesus from the dead. Mary Magdalene went to the tomb. It seems as if in this account, she went by herself in the dark to the tomb. She was devastated. She made the same journey that so many of us have made in our lives. Perhaps we went to the graveside following the service of our loved one. Maybe we went in a processional and gathered around the grave. Maybe we had another celebration when we either had a burial or scattered the ashes. But we've made that trip. We've gone to the site of death. Maybe we go regularly to the graveside or that place We'll remember our loved one who's died. We've all made that journey. So we can know Mary's hurt, pain, and devastation as she hurried to the tomb, to the place where they had buried her Jesus. However, we may not be able to identify, or maybe we can identify with her when she sees that the stone has been rolled away. She must have peeked in and saw that there was no body. I suppose if we went to the graveside and saw that there was nothing there, we too would run away and say, "They've taken the body away." She ran back to where the disciples were gathered and she said, "They've taken the Lord's body away and we don't know where they've taken him." I like what one commentator says about the two disciples. It says two men, and the commentator said, well, probably boys, began to race each other to the tomb to see what was going on. We think of the disciples as being somehow full-grown men, as being somehow austere figures, but they were probably just kids, and they were racing to the tomb, trying to outdo each other. The disciple whom Jesus loved got there first, peeked in, and saw nothing. Peter came and he went in and found grave clothes, even the headcloth, folded up neatly and simply put in place. The other disciple went in, and according to the reading, it says they believed. But I want to know, what did they believe? Because the next line said they didn't understand about the resurrection from the dead. They went back to the other disciples. Mary Magdalene, very special lady, stayed. She was devastated. She didn't know what in the world had happened. She was like us. She wanted some type of closure for her experience in losing the one whom she thought was God's special person. She must have looked inside the tomb again and saw two angels, and writer Matthew Fox always tells us that angels are a sign of God's presence. And they say, "What are you looking for?" She said, "Well, I'm looking for Jesus." Well, obviously, he's not here. God has raised him from the dead. She turned around, and in her tears, in her weeping, and please know, tears are not bad. They don't feel good. But as Cynthia Bergrove says, crying is a sign that we are willing to endure and let our love go on, even though our loved one has died. Tears may well be a symbol that we're willing to continue loving in spite of our pain. And in her tears, she turns around and Jesus is there, but she doesn't recognize him. We don't know why. She thinks maybe he's the gardener. And she tries again. She's really working hard to find where they've put this man she loved so much. And she says, "Sir, if you've taken him away, just tell me where, and I'll take care of him. I'll take care of the body if you'll just tell me where." "Why are you crying?" "Well, they've taken Jesus' body away. he's gone. And Jesus, whom God had raised from the dead, simply said one word. Maria. And she said, Rabboni, teacher, master of wisdom. It doesn't say this in the text, but in my image, he opens his arms and envelops her in his arms. And she thinks, now I am at home. Resurrection is an encounter with God, experiencing the presence of the divine. We hear this story about Mary, but we do well to ask, how does resurrection function in our lives today? In short, we encounter the divine, we experience resurrection every time we connect with God. And we connect with God in some powerful ways. We want resurrection to be some sort of thing. Wow, the sun's finally out. That's what we want. We want a brilliant burst of light. We want hallelujahs to be sung out of the heavens. We want a sign from God saying, I've raised Jesus from the dead. And we say, whoopee! Oh yeah, we can believe this, God. And yet, encountering the divine, experiencing God in resurrection, more often happens when our spirits connect with God's presence and someone else. And it usually happens when we're offering our lives in love to another. In the spring of 1960, a family in New Orleans responded to a request for children to take part in an action. And as a part of this, in the spring of 1960 in New Orleans, Louisiana, a little girl took a school test, and she did extremely well. She did so well on the test that the next fall, she was allowed to attend school. First grade. A little girl was named Ruby Bridges. She was African American, and she was the first African American child to attend a white school in New Orleans. When Ruby Bridges went to school, people were on the streets protesting. There were throngs around. The United States Marshal Service accompanied her to school at this elementary school in New Orleans. Families pulled their children out of school. All the white kids were pulled out of the school. The first day Ruby went to school, she was in the entire school by herself. There was a teacher who was willing to teach her named Mrs. Hedges. And so Ruby did this. The next day, however, Ruby went to school by herself again, went through the throngs of angry, yelling, screaming people. But on the second day, another little girl went to school. A white girl by the name of Pam Foreman, the daughter of a Methodist minister. Now you know I like this story. That broke the boycott. Pam's father, Reverend Foreman, simply said, I only want my child to have the privilege of attending school. And after that, other white families began attending, and finally, more children came back to school. But Ruby went through the entire school year with only her teacher and herself in a classroom. Empty chairs all around, just Ruby and her teacher. As she learned to read and write, she was a rather bright little girl. Her parents had responded to a request from the NAACP for families that were willing to break the color barrier in New Orleans. Now, we look at Ruby Bridges and we say, my goodness, what a beautiful little girl she was. Some of us are old enough, a couple of us in here are old enough, we can still remember the incident, and we can see picture of this beautiful little girl being escorted by United States Marshals into this school every day, all year long. In fact, she was threatened by the crowd that they were going to poison her. She had to bring her food from home. It had to be inspected, and she ate food she brought from home every day. Usually when she went through the crowd, she simply went right through, not even stopping, not even noticing anybody. But one day her teacher noticed. She stopped and talked to the crowd. When Ruby got into the school, her teacher said, Ruby, why were you talking to them? She said, oh, I wasn't talking to them. I was praying. So the teacher found out that every day on her way to school, a few blocks away, Ruby would stop and offer a prayer. Then when she left school, she would stop and offer the same prayer. But on this day in question, she forgot to pray until she got in the middle of the crowd, and then she remembered. And so she stopped and prayed. And her prayer goes something like this. Please, God, try to forgive these people. Because even if they say those bad things, they don't know what they're doing. So you can forgive them, just like you did those folks a long time ago when they said terrible things about you. The power of love is at work here, my friends, in a beautiful little girl. But I want to talk a minute about the Bridges family and the Foreman family. Ruby's parents and Pam's parents, who made an extremely difficult decision to allow their little 6-year-old children to walk into the middle of chaos and threat of death. My temptation would be to call them crazy. But I suspicion that both of these families somehow had experienced resurrection. They had encountered the divine. Now, I tend to suspicion if it would have been my daughter or son, I would have wanted to grasp hold of that experience of God that I'd had and say, well, that's good enough. Let's not push it. But somehow these two families and millions of other people in our world have understood an encounter with the divine is not something we cling to, but something we live into and step out into the world and and love. We really don't know the story of Mary and Jesus. In my mind, outside this tomb, Mary and Jesus have experienced the presence of God's love in their life. They were not only friends, they not only had deep love for each other, they were co-journeyers into the mystery of God. Jesus put his arms around Mary, and she would have liked to have stayed right there forever. But after a moment, the risen one gently let go and pushed her back a little and said to her, "Mary, don't cling to me. Don't try to grasp this moment or even grasp hold of all the experiences we've had. But take this moment and go. Go tell the others. Go tell the world that you have encountered the divine, that God has raised me from the dead." And then perhaps one of the most excruciatingly difficult acts Mary ever did in her life it took all the energy of love for her as she gazed in the eyes of this beautiful love emanating from this man, Jesus. Reluctantly, she turned away and she began to walk away. Then she began to run. And then she turned into a full street burst, and she went dashing into the room where the disciples were gathered, and she said to them, "I've encountered the divine. The Lord is risen." Let us celebrate resurrection together in our litany of faith.